my daughter's birthday party, my sister brought a special homemade cake. She whispered, "I made sure it's unforgettable." My daughter is severely allergic to peanuts. I didn't yell. I quietly switched the cake with the one I had professionally tested earlier. 10 minutes later, her own child took the first bite, and my sister went pale before I even spoke. I have replayed that afternoon more times than I can count. The way the light fell through the kitchen window onto the yellow tablecloth, the smell of sugar and ribbon, and the particular kind of joy that only exists at a child's birthday party. Fragile and bright, like a soap bubble you're afraid to breathe near. I have replayed it slowly, frame by frame, the way you do when something almost happened and your body doesn't know how to stop preparing for the version where it did. My daughter Lily turned 7 that Saturday. 7 years of learning her laugh, the one that starts silent, her shoulders shaking before the sound catches up. 7 years of knowing exactly how she takes her oatmeal, which stuffed animal she needs when she has a fever, which nightlight color means she's already half asleep. 7 years of reading every ingredient label in every grocery store in our town, of calling restaurants ahead of time, of carrying 2 EpiPens everywhere we go because the world was not designed with Lily in mind, and I made peace with that a long time ago. Peanuts. That's all it takes. Not an intolerance, not a sensitivity that makes her uncomfortable for an afternoon. Anaphylaxis. The kind that closes a throat in minutes. The kind that ends things. If you've ever loved someone whose life has a condition attached to it, you understand that it changes you quietly. You become vigilant in a way that other people call anxious, in a way that reads as overprotective or dramatic until the one moment it isn't. And then, in that one moment, you are the only thing, standing between your child and a world that forgot to check the label. I knew this about myself. I had accepted it. It had never been a problem. Until my sister decided it was. Her name is Diane. We grew up in the same house, shared the same mother's cooking, the same cramped bathroom, the same secondhand winter coats. We were not close as children in the way that feels warm when you look back on it. We were close in the way of proximity, two people who orbited the same small world and occasionally collided. She was 4 years older, which at certain ages feels like a chasm, and at others feels like nothing at all. When we became adults, the distance that had always existed between us simply stopped having to hide. She was the kind of woman who needed to be the most important person in every room she entered, not loudly. That's what made her effective. She did it quietly, through a series of small maneuvers that were individually deniable. A comment here, a comparison there, a well-placed story about someone else's failure timed right before your own success. She was gifted at it. I spent years feeling like something was wrong with me before I understood the architecture of what she was doing. Our mother loved her in a way that was hard to watch, not because it was wrong to love her. She was her daughter, and love doesn't require fairness, but because that love had been used as a leash for years, and I had spent most of my life trying to earn the same warmth through channels that were never actually open to me. Our mother called Diane first with news. She visited Diane first at the holidays. When Lily was born, it was Diane who stood beside our mother in every photograph, and I was somewhere in the background, still bleeding from the delivery, smiling. I don't say this to make myself the hero. I say this because you need to understand that I had watched this woman for 34 years. I knew her tells. I knew the particular brightness in her voice that meant something unkind was coming dressed in generosity's clothing. I knew what she meant when she said she was doing something special. Lily's party was on a Saturday in October, one of those days that feels like the world turned the saturation up on purpose. We had 12 children in our backyard, streamers in her favorite color, a game of musical chairs that ended in a pile-on of giggling 7-year-olds, and the particular controlled chaos of an afternoon I had been planning for 6 weeks. I want you to understand the planning, because people hear birthday party, and they think streamers and cake and a few hours of noise, and they don't think about what it looks like when your child has a severe allergy. I had the cake ordered and tested from a certified allergen-free bakery 2 towns over. I had spoken to them personally. I had confirmed the ingredients, the facility protocols, the fact that they did not process any tree nuts or peanuts on the premises. I had picked it up that morning myself, driven it home carefully, and placed it in the refrigerator under a condition that was frankly excessive. I had written Lily's name on a piece of tape and stuck it to the top of the box like she might forget which birthday was hers. The cake was vanilla with strawberry filling and a fondant decoration of a small horse, because Lily had decided horses were her personality at approximately age 5 and had not wavered since. I had also made a test slice from the bakery the previous weekend, given it to Lily's allergist, confirmed there was no cross-contamination risk. That level of preparation. That is the level I operate at. When Diane arrived, she came through the gate with a smile and a box. A white bakery box, but not from a bakery. You could tell by the box itself. The kind you can buy at a craft store, not the kind they give you at an actual shop. It was tied with a bow. She was holding it with both hands, the way people hold things they want you to notice they've done. "I made a cake," she said. "Don't worry, it's a special one." And then she leaned close and whispered it. I made sure it's unforgettable. She whispered it with her eyes bright and her voice quiet, and the smile on her face was the smile I had seen 100 times in 100 rooms, and I knew, not suspected, not feared, I knew exactly what was inside that box. Here is what a body does when it receives information that the mind hasn't processed yet. It goes very still. It runs a rapid internal audit. It looks at the evidence in front of it, the box, the smile, the whisper, the word unforgettable, and it calculates. And then it makes a decision faster than thought. I did not reach for the box. I did not react to the smile. I said, "Oh, how thoughtful," in a voice that was completely even, because I had lived with this woman for long enough to know that giving her the reaction she was looking for would only change the choreography, and I needed to remain in control of the choreography. "Why don't I take that inside?" I said, "and we can set up the table." She gave it to me easily. She had no reason not to. As far as she was concerned, she had arrived. She had delivered the thing. And now she was waiting for the part where she got to watch. I carried it into the kitchen. I put it on the counter, and I stood there for exactly 30 seconds, alone, and I breathed. Then I opened the box. Peanut butter frosting, piped in rosettes, carefully done, the way you do when you want it to look like you tried. A chocolate base, which Lily didn't even like. But that wasn't the point, was it? The point was the frosting, dense and nutty and glossy in the kitchen light, decorating the top of a cake my sister had driven to my home, carried through my gate, and placed into my hands with a smile. I made sure it's unforgettable. There's a kind of anger that burns hot, and there is a kind that goes cold. And I want you to know that what I felt in that moment was not hot. It was not messy or loud or out of control. It settled into me like ice water, slow and total. And I stood with my hands flat on the counter, and I looked at that cake, and I made a decision. Not a reckless one, a careful one. The kind that comes from years of watching someone and finally understanding that the only way to respond to a performance is with a better one. I closed the box. I put it in the back of the refrigerator, on the highest shelf, behind the leftover pasta and the salad dressing. I took Lily's real cake out of its bakery box, the white vanilla cake with the strawberry filling and the little fondant horse, and I put it on the cake stand I had bought specifically for today. And I carried it outside into the sunshine and the streamers and the noise of 12 children who were still alive and still shrieking and still entirely unaware. And I went back to the party. Diane had found her place by the garden table, the way she always did, adjacent to the center, positioned to observe. Her son Marcus was running with the other kids, 6 years old and red-faced and joyful in the way children are when they've been allowed outside after too long. He was a sweet kid. This matters. Is a genuinely sweet kid who happened to share DNA with someone who required very close watching. She was holding a paper cup of lemonade and watching me. I smiled at her. She smiled back. It was the most honest conversation we had had in years. The party moved through its stages the way well-planned things do. The games, the chaos, the brief moment of crying from a child who did not win the egg and spoon race and recovered in 40 seconds. The photos, the singing. I watched Lily's face through all of it. That private survey I do, the mother's constant background check, the scan for flushing or hives, or the particular way she touches her throat when something is wrong. Everything clear. Everything fine. My daughter, laughing with her friends, wearing a paper crown slightly too big for her head, more alive than anything I'd ever made or done. We brought the cake out at 4 o'clock. I carried it. Diane stood up from her chair. We sang. Lily's eyes went wide at the candles. She made her wish with the particular seriousness children bring to wishes, like it was a contract she intended to honor. She blew them all out in one breath. And then I cut the cake. I cut it carefully. I made sure Lily got the piece with the horse on it. I handed plates around. And then, this is the part I want you to hold. I stepped back, and I watched. Marcus got a piece. Diane had moved to stand near the table because she could not help herself, because she was waiting for something and proximity was part of how she waited. She was watching Lily's plate. Marcus took the first bite. Chocolate-free. Vanilla, strawberry, fondant, normal, safe, delicious, actually, because I had chosen well. He chewed. He looked satisfied in the way of 6-year-olds who have been given dessert. And Diane's face did something I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. It moved through a sequence. First expectation, then confusion, then a kind of rapid internal recalculation I recognized from years of watching her compose herself in real time. Her eyes went to me. I was already looking at her. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Her face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Not white exactly. Something more diluted. Something drained. She knew. She knew that I had known. She knew that I had moved the cake. She knew that her son had just eaten what she had brought for my daughter. And she was doing the math. And the math was coming up as a very particular kind of terrible. I cut another slice of cake. I handed it to one of Lily's friends. I smiled at the room. I did not look at Diane again for a long time. If you've ever had a moment where the thing you've been preparing for, not consciously, not with intent, but in the deep, quiet part of yourself that just watches, finally arrives, you know what the silence afterward feels like. Not empty, full, like a room after a piece of music ends, where the sound is gone but the air still holds the shape of it. That's what the rest of that afternoon was. I was present for every moment of it. I was present for the last of the games, for the wrapping paper on the gifts, for Lily's careful stack of cards she couldn't read yet but refused to let anyone put down. I was present for the goodbyes at the gate, for the streamers coming down, for the moment the last car pulled out of the driveway and the yard went quiet. Diane had not spoken to me privately during any of it. She had spoken to the other guests. She had laughed at appropriate moments. She had helped, actually, carrying plates inside, because she is nothing if not a woman who understands the value of visible helpfulness. But she had not looked at me again with the same eyes she had had when she arrived. Those eyes were gone. In their place was something more careful. She came to say goodbye with Marcus beside her, his hand in hers, sugar still visible at the corner of his mouth. "Lovely party," she said. "Thank you for coming," I said. We held each other's eyes for one beat longer than was natural. She nodded. I nodded. She left, and that was the last ordinary thing that happened between us for a very long time. I want to be honest about what came next, because the story doesn't end at the party, and it wouldn't be fair to let you think it did. The days after that Saturday were strange, not loud strange, quiet strange, which is worse, because it moves like groundwater, invisible until it finds the crack and comes through. I didn't call her. I wasn't ready to have a conversation I hadn't yet fully prepared for, and I had learned a long time ago that going into a conversation with Diane unprepared was like walking into a courthouse without your evidence. She would find the gaps. She would fill them with her version. She had always been better at the off-the-cuff performance, and I had learned to make up for that with documentation. Documentation I want to tell you about the documentation. The week after the party, I called the bakery again. I asked them to send me the allergen certification for Lily's cake in writing. They did, without question. They'd sent it before, they sent it again. A PDF with their certification number and the full ingredient list. I printed it. I put it in a folder. Then I opened the white bakery box I had left in my refrigerator and I took several photographs of the cake inside. I photographed the frosting. I photographed the box itself. And then I did something that people would probably call excessive. I took a small sample of the frosting to Lily's allergist, the one we had been seeing for 5 years, and I asked her to confirm what was in it. She called me 3 days later. Peanut paste, present throughout the frosting, high concentration. Not a trace, not accidental cross-contamination from a shared surface. A high concentration of peanut paste throughout the frosting layer, consistent with it being a deliberate ingredient. I printed that report, too. I put it in the folder next to the bakery certificate. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water and I thought about what kind of person walks into a child's birthday party carrying a cake deliberately made with the ingredient that child could die from. I sat with that thought for a long time. I tried to find the charitable interpretation, the oversight, the confusion, the terrible miscommunication, and I couldn't make it fit. The whisper wouldn't let me. I made sure it's unforgettable. That sentence was not an accident. That sentence was a declaration. So I made my own. The call from my mother came 9 days after the party. Diane had gotten there first, which I had expected. She had given my mother a version of events that I could reconstruct almost perfectly just from the way my mother opened the conversation. Slightly too warm, slightly too searching. The tone of someone who has been told a story and is trying to verify it through your reaction. Diane says there was some confusion about the cake, she said. Does she? I said. She said you didn't serve the one she brought. She's a bit hurt. I want to pause here and let that land. She's a bit hurt. My daughter is allergic to peanuts. My sister brought a cake made with peanut butter frosting to her birthday party and whispered to me that she'd made it unforgettable. And the line my mother had been given, the line she was now delivering to me, across a phone from her kitchen where Diane's photograph was on the refrigerator and mine was in the hallway, was that Diane was hurt. Mom, I said, I'd like you to come over on Saturday. What for? I want to show you something. She came on Saturday. I made tea. I sat her at the kitchen table, and I opened the folder. I showed her the bakery certificate first. The allergen-free cake, certified, dated, with the facility number and my name on the order. I showed her the photographs of Diane's cake, the box, the frosting, the careful rosettes. And then I slid the allergist report across the table, and I let her read it without saying a word. She read it twice. The second time was slower. When she put it down, she didn't look at me immediately. She looked at the window, at the morning light, and I watched something move across her face that I had not seen there very often. Something that looked like the particular grief of understanding a thing you cannot unlearn. She could have died, my mother said. Not a question. Yes, I said. We sat with that for a long time. Here is what I've learned about confronting people with evidence of their own cruelty. It rarely produces the immediate cinematic collapse you might hope for. Life is not a courtroom drama. People do not crumble on cue. What they do, more often, is negotiate. They find the exit routes. They look for the technical escape, the I didn't know, the it was an accident, the you're reading this wrong, because the alternative is to stand fully in what they did, and most people are not built to do that without a fight. Diane's fight lasted 3 weeks. My mother, to her credit, and I say that with full awareness of how much credit she had not earned over the years, my mother did not let it go. I don't know exactly what happened in the conversations between them. I wasn't there, but I know my mother called me twice in those 3 weeks, and both times she sounded older, more tired, like she was carrying something she hadn't expected to still be carrying at this stage of her life. The third call was from Diane. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let it go again. The third time, I picked up. She did not apologize. I want you to understand that clearly. She did not say I'm sorry or I was wrong, or any arrangement of words that acknowledged what she had done. What she said, in a voice that had been carefully calibrated to sound reasonable, was that she thought I was being dramatic, that if she had actually wanted to hurt Lily, she would have, and here she paused, which I think she meant to be meaningful, as if the pause itself proved the innocence of the act. She would have done it differently. You would have done it differently, I repeated. The silence on the line had texture. I'm saying there was no intent to. Diane, I said, I have the allergist report. I have the photographs. I have the date on the bakery certificate, and I have your voice in my memory saying that you made it unforgettable, and I want you to understand something. I paused. I am not angry. I am finished. I hung up. I don't use that word carelessly. Finished. I had used it that day in the specific way you use a word when you finally let go of the hope that the thing might become something it was never going to be. Not a door slamming, more like a window closing, carefully, on a cold draft you'd been living with so long you'd stopped noticing it. The weeks after that had a particular quality of lightness that surprised me. I had expected it to feel like loss. For years, I had maintained the structure of that relationship, the calls, the appearances, the birthday cards, the annual effort to keep something functional enough to call family, out of some combination of obligation and hope, the two things that will keep you tethered to a situation longer than anything else. When I let go of both, I expected the fall. Instead, there was room. Room in my Sundays where I used to feel the low, background dread of a family obligation I hadn't yet processed how to manage. Room in my thinking that had previously been occupied by the constant low-level calculation of how to protect Lily's world from someone I'd been pretending was safe. Room in my chest, somewhere around the sternum, that I hadn't realized was clenched until it stopped being clenched. Lily noticed. Kids notice everything. They don't always have language for it, but they notice. One evening, about a month after the party, she was sitting at the kitchen table drawing the way she does. Intensely, with a kind of focused happiness that is one of my favorite things about her. And she looked up at me and said, "Is Auntie Diane coming to Christmas?" I considered the question. I'd not yet talked to her about any of this in any real way. She was 7, and 7 is too young for certain truths. But I had also promised myself I would never lie to her in ways that would require maintenance later. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I said. "We're going to have our own Christmas this year." She looked at me with the particular directness of a child who has decided to take information at face value. Just us? Just us and Gran. Maybe some friends. She thought about this. "Can I help decorate the tree?" "You can decorate the whole tree by yourself if you want." She went back to her drawing. That was the whole conversation. 7-year-olds are, in this way, extraordinary. They have not yet learned to make grief more complicated than it needs to be. I need to tell you about my mother because she is not finished yet in this story. 2 months after the party, she called me on a Tuesday afternoon, not the careful, mediating voice she'd used in those middle weeks. Something older, smaller. "I owe you an apology," she said. I sat down. "I've been thinking about how I've handled things. Between you and Diane? For a long time?" She stopped. "I think I've let you carry things that I should have seen earlier." If you've ever waited a very long time to hear a particular sentence, you know that it doesn't always land the way you imagined it would. You imagine it will unlock something, crack something open, restore a thing you thought was lost. What it actually does, in my experience, in that Tuesday phone call, is sit beside you, quietly, and keep you company. It doesn't fix the years, but it sits there, and that is not nothing. "Thank you," I said. "That matters." We talked for an hour, longer than we had talked in years, maybe since before Lily was born, a real conversation without a third party in it, without her trying to manage my reaction to someone else. She asked about Lily. She asked about my work. She asked, and then this was the thing that undid me slightly, that made me set down my tea because I needed both hands to hold the phone. She asked how I was. Not how Lily was. Not how things were. How I was. I told her. I told her about the years of managing it, the vigilance, The labels and the EpiPens and the restaurant calls and the way I had quietly adapted every birthday, every holiday, every social event to account for the one thing that could take my daughter from me in minutes. I told her it was not a burden I resented, because it wasn't. It was just love, that kind of love that becomes practical and organized and precise because the stakes demand it. But I also told her that it was exhausting to do it surrounded by people who expected me to be grateful for the performance of family, while I was quietly managing its risks. She listened. I don't know what she said to Diane after that call. I don't know what she said to her in December, when the Christmas I had not invited my sister to happened quietly and beautifully in my own house with my daughter and my mother and two friends who understood that good food and low stakes were a gift in themselves. I know that Diane called me once more, in January. I didn't answer. She didn't leave a voicemail. There is a version of this story where I confront her loudly, where I take the box back out to the garden at the party and open it in front of everyone and say, "Look what my sister brought," where there is a scene, witnesses, the full public exposure of it. I have thought about that version. I understand why people want it. There is a satisfaction to the idea of visible justice. The thing named in public, everyone forced to look. But here is what I know about visible justice. It rarely gives you what you actually need. What I needed was not an audience. What I needed was for my daughter to grow up in a safe world, surrounded by people who could be trusted, maintained by a mother who had learned to distinguish between relationships that cost more than they gave and relationships that deserved the energy I had to spend. The quiet move was not about strategy, in the end. It was not calculated in the way that makes a good revenge narrative. The cold genius of it, the planning and the patience. It was something simpler. It was the act of a person who had spent enough years watching to know exactly when to stop watching and start choosing. I chose Lily. I chose my own steadiness. I chose the life on the other side of that Saturday, which looked and looks remarkably like peace. The folder is still in my filing cabinet. Top drawer, back section, between Lily's school records and the house insurance. I don't take it out. I don't need to. The allergist report and the bakery certificate and the photographs sit there in the dark, not doing anything in particular, not pointed at anyone, just existing, just being what they are, evidence of something that happened, documentation of a world that was and isn't anymore. Lily doesn't know most of this story. One day she will. Maybe when she's 12 or 16 or 25 or whatever age she is. Or when she asks me why her aunt isn't at the things that matter, I will tell her the truth carefully in language that is appropriate for wherever she is. I will tell her that sometimes people we love, people who are supposed to be safe, are not safe, and that protecting the people we love sometimes means making hard choices that don't look dramatic from the outside, that the power in those moments is not in the loudness of them. That dignity does not require an audience. She will probably have questions. She's a child who has always had questions, who will grow into a person who interrogates the world with the careful precision of someone who has been taught that the world rewards the attentive. I like that about her. I hope she keeps it. I think about the whisper sometimes. I made sure it's unforgettable. She was not wrong, in the end. It was unforgettable. It is the thing I will remember about that period of my life, that chapter with my sister with more clarity than almost anything else. Not the hurt of it. The hurt fades, or at least it moves from the front of the room to somewhere more manageable. But the moment itself, the understanding of it, the thing it taught me about who I was and what I was capable of when the thing I love most was in the room. I'm a person who does not yell. I'm a person who watches. I'm a person who keeps the receipts, not out of pettiness, not out of some long-term desire to wound, but because the world sometimes needs evidence of its own behavior, and someone has to be the one who holds it. That is what I am. I have made peace with it. October came back around, the way it does. Lily turned 8 with the same streamers and a new paper crown and a cake I ordered from the same bakery 2 towns over. Vanilla, strawberry filling, a fondant horse, this time named because at 8 you have opinions about names, and she had decided His name was Captain. 12 children, approximately the same chaos. Lily's face, the same brightness, the one breath wish, the careful stack of cards. My mother came. She sat in the garden with a glass of lemonade, and she watched my daughter run through the streamers, and she looked at me once, across the garden, with an expression that I didn't have a name for, but that I understood completely. We didn't need to talk about it. Some things are just held between people, stored in the look and not the language, understood without requiring explanation. Diane was not there. The gate was not locked. I don't think about my gate in terms of locks. But she was not there, and the air in the garden was clean. And Lily ate 3 pieces of cake and got frosting on her chin, and showed no signs of anything except the robust, exhausting, magnificent state of being a child who has been loved into safety. At the end of the afternoon, after the last guest had gone and the streamers were coming down again, and Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with Captain the fondant, horse clutched in one hand, I stood in the kitchen and looked out at the garden through the window. The light was the same as last year, yellow, slanted, the particular color of an October afternoon that knows summer is over and has decided to be beautiful anyway. I made a cup of tea. I stood there, and I drank it slowly, and I felt not triumphant, not vindicated, not whatever the word is for the feeling you're supposed to feel when the story lands on justice. I felt something quieter than that, something that, if I had to name it, I would call simply whole. If you've ever had to protect someone you love from someone you were supposed to trust, you know that the hardest part is not the moment of protection. The hardest part is the afterward, the rewriting of the story you'd been telling yourself, the one where that person was safe, was family, was someone who would not require you to choose. The rewriting takes longer than the moment. Sometimes it takes years. But it is possible. I want you to know that it is possible. The version of yourself that comes out on the other side of that rewriting is more accurate, more honest, less burdened by the maintenance of something that was never going to become what you needed it to be. And your daughter turns 8 and eats 3 pieces of safe cake and falls asleep clutching a fondant horse named Captain. And the light in your kitchen is October yellow through the window. And the folder is in the filing cabinet where it belongs. And the gate is unlocked because you are not afraid anymore. That is the unforgettable part, the one she didn't plan for.